opportunities to protect the public from repeat DUI offenders, and flat out surrendered on the war of drugs by, in effect, decriminalizing hard felony drug possession. We know there's been some disastrous results from these policies. Violent crime is at a 25-year high. Murder is up 80%. Aggravated assaults are up. Rape is up. These policies, including some particularly bad anti-police legislation in the House, are making Washington a dangerous place. And this is verified by law enforcement throughout the state. So, and on top of that, it doesn't seem that they've got the message, because the House, two House Democrats have introduced legislation to reduce the penalties for drive-by shootings at the same time that violent crime is soaring in Washington. So we have a package of bills, which we'll talk about during this press conference, to try to fix some of the things that went wrong last session. Representative Mossbrucker.
Thank you very much, Senator Patton, and thank you to the media for joining us today. We're very grateful. The House of Representatives and the Senate have united together to provide solutions to the problems that were left last session, the ones that Senator Patton mentioned and others. We want to create a safe Washington. We've put together over 45 bills so far and 2 budget provisos to address this problem. We have a robust package for you today of bills that are introduced or are being introduced or have been introduced throughout our legislature. One, you'll see bills addressing the policing bills, the 1310 use of force, and also the 1054 police tactics bill that left the police, we would argue, handcuffed instead of the criminals. We have a package of bills addressing putting victims and survivors first and putting safety back in our communities. We have a package of bills Senator Wagner is going to talk about that has to do with fixing the Department of Correction problems that we've all seen throughout the news. We also have bills regarding property crime, which we would argue that are connected to State v. Blake, the court ruling that came down through the legislature last year, and we have fixes for that as well. So again, just really grateful that you're here today, and I'm very honored to be able to tell you about Jill Brown. She'll be joining us today. She's one of the strongest, most inspirational women that I know. Jill Brown is the wife of fallen officer Sergeant Jeremy Brown with the Clark County Sheriff's Department. We've invited her here today to share their story and to speak to the real world consequences of the current legislation. Jill Brown.
Thank you, Representative Mossbrucker, for inviting me to join you today. It was an honor to participate in several of the public safety roundtables that you hosted over the summer, and learn about how these bills are affecting not just law enforcement, but fire, mental health, and healthcare professionals, and most importantly, the communities that they serve. I'm grateful for the thought and care that your peers have devoted to this effort, and I look forward to supporting you as we move into next session. I want to respect everyone's time, and I'm going to do my best to stay on topic. So thank you in advance for your patience. As Representative Mossbrucker mentioned, I am Jill Brown. Sergeant Jeremy Brown of the Clark County Sheriff's Office was my husband, a devoted father and grandfather, brother, son, uncle, mentor, and friend to many. Jeremy was a truly exceptional human in all aspects of his life. He was a United States veteran before entering law enforcement, an MP in the Marines, and spent his entire life serving and protecting the lives of others. There are no words still that might appropriately convey what was taken from us to someone that didn't have the good fortune to know him. Jeremy was murdered in the line of duty on July 23rd. He was ambushed in a parking lot while conducting surveillance. His assailants were known to law enforcement. There was reasonable suspicion that they were trafficking in stolen firearms, but there was not probable cause for arrest, which under these new laws is the threshold for use of force to include vehicular pursuit. While I cannot confirm that agencies involved were already responding within the parameters of these new laws, I can confirm that 2 pursuits of these individuals were called off in the days leading up to Jeremy's murder, one of them just hours before. If the car had been pulled over, the guns would have likely been retrieved and my husband would be with us today. Let me be clear that I don't place any blame on the agencies that were involved, but on the environment that has forced them to question how they can and should respond. Jeremy had many concerns with the public safety bills that have recently been passed, 1310 being at the top of his list. Knowing this and paired with the understanding that it could have played a role in our loss, I was immediately compelled to give him a voice because his was tragically and senselessly quieted in the course of his duty. So I moved forward, reaching out to local legislators, gathering up information, resources, seeking allies, pursuing amendments to these public safety bills, and advocating for law enforcement is now my full-time job. I am not just Sergeant Jeremy Brown's widow. I am a survivor stepping forward on behalf of our family to give my husband a voice and serve in a new way. It's important to acknowledge that I approach this opportunity as a thoughtful, compassionate, reasonable human seeking change. I am not here as someone that does not acknowledge the need for reform. I do believe reform is necessary, but there are many ambiguities and inconsistencies within this package of bills, and agencies across the state are interpreting them differently, which brings added concern. Obviously, my priority is 1310. Concerning permissible uses of force. It's the most paralyzing to law enforcement and presents the greatest challenges. Removing an officer's ability to intervene unless they are witness to an event and prohibiting them from using their training and experience to manage a perceived or potential crisis in a fair manner is not the answer. And not just in situations such as Jeremy's. Consider someone experiencing a mental health crisis or domestic violence victims, property crimes. House Bill 1310 is adversely affecting the safety of our communities. As written, this new law ties the hands of law enforcement to help or intervene. And I understand and respect the intentions behind the bills, absolutely. But unintended consequences have surfaced and more will be revealed the longer that we take to address these concerns. There will be more stories, equally as tragic as ours, if they are not amended. Combine that with the fact that so many officers are retiring early, lateraling to more law enforcement friendly communities, or leaving the profession altogether because of the climate in Washington, we could find ourselves in a very unfortunate environment, even more so than we do today. There has to be solutions that will appropriately serve communities and the men and women who have vowed to protect us. I want to participate in those conversations. And so I'm starting here. I know I've taken far more time than anticipated, and I appreciate your patience. I just thank you for the opportunity to give my husband and those that he served with a voice today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. We're very grateful for you, and I'm sure that Jeremy's very proud of you. You remain in my prayers.
Thank you.
There's many fixes that we have on both sides of the chambers in a bicameral manner on 1310 use of force and 1054, which is the police tactics bill. But we have one area that we know that we have an expert in, and I'm honored to introduce my colleague, Eric Robertson. He's a representative I have the honor of serving with. He was a Washington State trooper for over 2 decades. He worked as a U.S. Marshal for 5 years. He served and continues to serve today as a legislator and an advocate. So we have him past and present. He introduced last year and again this year vehicular pursuit legislation to try to fix the problems that one of which we just heard. He reintroduced them in 21 and now again in 22. I'd like to introduce our representative, Eric Robertson.
Thank you, Representative Mossbrucker. It's a privilege to be here and join this group and to be a part of something I'm very passionate about. As was pointed out, I spent a career in law enforcement and hope that my experience, having been in dozens of pursuits during my career, some of which ended in apprehension of the individual, and some I called off because they were unsafe and didn't it didn't outweigh the risk that was involved. And officers around our state, whether they're state troopers, county deputies, city police officers, they face that decision every day. And in most cases, they skillfully and professionally make those decisions. And we have a better community because of it. As was pointed out, I ran the amendment last year to try and fix the flaws that were in the legislation that went into effect in July. And I'm really proud and pleased to have continued to work with the chairman and ranking member of the Public Safety Committee over the interim, discussing this issue and how we fix the flawed bill that's been in effect for 6 months and 5 days. We've seen crime exponentially expand due to this and other poor legislation that was passed and went into effect July 1st. House Bill 1788 is the fix to our pursuit policy debacle that has been in place for that 6 months. It simply changes the standard to the reasonable suspicion for a criminal offense, which was the standard prior to July 1st. It also puts in safeguards. It mandates supervisory involvement. It also mandates that the officer and the supervisor involved evaluate the environmental conditions, speed, traffic, pedestrians in the area, as well as the weather and how that could affect the outcome. It'll clearly expand the ability for officers to pursue those folks. Like I said, it has that discretion in there to do so. Puts the parameters, those sideboards that I just explained, around it, and also has an accountability measure in there. And we have great law enforcement accountability measures in the state of Washington. We have a model policy at the Washington State Patrol that's used throughout the U.S. For accountability. So we need to put the decisions back with law enforcement officers and their supervisors. They need to be able to risk that balance between pursuing and the risk against failing to apprehend a potentially violent offender, because when you're pursuing someone, you don't know what they've just done, and they could be that very violent offender that remains out into the community and continues to engage in criminal activity and making our communities more unsafe. So we need to revise the pursuit policy for Washington, put the officers back in the driver's seat with supervisors there to help them, and accountability for error. So I'm hopeful that that bill will be heard. I'm in conversation with the chairman and the ranking member to advocate for that. And additionally, these things sometimes cost money, and we've got a great profession and our law enforcement officers out there. And Representative Drew Stokesbury and I just introduced House Bill 1787, which is going to be funding the recruitment, retention, and support of the profession, because we want the best to be policing our communities and being partners with the communities for public safety. And so I hope that folks will take a look at 1787. You know, it's a fair amount of money, but it's what's needed to make sure that we have top-notch law enforcement officers that we're recruiting, retaining, and supporting through their professional careers. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciate you being here, and all of your experience is very valuable to the state of Washington. We're grateful. Another area that we're working on from both chambers is putting victims and safety of our community first. We heard on listening tours throughout the state how important this is. I'm out of time. I want to be respectful, so we have time for questions, which we're looking forward to, and just touch on a few of those areas. We're working hard on human trafficking. As you know, that's been exponentially increased as well. We have a bill regarding the missing and murdered Indigenous persons. This is the Bring Them Home bill. We've been working on this for 4 or 5 years on the House side, and we're working very hard to make sure that we do everything to find justice for those Indigenous persons who've been missing and have been taken from their tribes. This bill will do 5 different things. I'll just touch on 2 of them. One of them is it'll simply allow the tribal members to pray over the body when they find a murdered loved one before the body is moved, but after the lead investigator has signed off. We need to respect the culture of the tribes at all times. It'll also set up a receiving house, a pilot project, if you will, in order to have a place for those to go who we find that are trafficked, that are tribal members who've been taken from their tribes and put in a trafficking ring. So it'll give them a safe place to help build their lives back with the resources they need. We have a bill regarding survivors, and we've heard stories of how they've been branded or microchipped with subdermal implants in order for the perpetrators to keep track of where they are. This is a heinous crime and needs to be addressed. We're asking the OCVA in order to give them some money through the Department of Commerce to get that tattoo removed. I mean, how harmful is it to look in the mirror every day and remember the tragedy that your life has been through? Just trying really hard to listen to the voice of those survivors who are in horrible ways. We have bills on domestic violence. Representative Clippard has introduced again an offender registry to make sure that the perpetrators don't go to the next person and harm them repeatedly. We have a bill on coercive control, trying to get at the genesis, the very beginning of why people go from, I love you so much, I want to marry you, to murder of the same person. How do we fix that, and how do we break that cycle of domestic violence? Senator Linda Wilson has 2 great bills. One allows victims to be present at all DV sentencing hearings if they choose to do so. It'll be part of the healing process. And then she also has a bill that would be able to withhold bail felony DV in felony DV cases. Representative Jenny Graham is graciously working hard to find crime victims and family scholarships for those who are suffering currently and have been through traumatic injuries due to the crime that we have rising in our neighborhoods. So we have a large package. You can look through that, and we're happy to talk on any of those. At this time, I'd love to introduce Senator Wagner, who was going to be talking about Department of Correction fixes. Senator.
Thank you. Earlier this year, Republicans on the Senate side released a 40-page report chronicling 5 years of failure at the Department of Corrections. And I would refer the folks listening today to that document. But it wasn't just finger pointing. We provided solutions. And I think it's worth reiterating that public safety doesn't end with an arrest. It doesn't end with a prosecution, and it doesn't end with a sentence. It ends when people serve their sentence, pay back their debt to society, provide justice to victims and their families, and when they get the tools they need to correct themselves and re-enter society as productive citizens. And to do that, our corrections facilities need to be properly staffed, equipped, and funded so they can provide a ripe environment for that rehabilitative service. Why then did the Democrats, in the middle of a COVID crisis, underfund our operating budget by $90 million in the middle of a pandemic? That was a choice. So corrections has had to cut staff, services, programs, And they're reducing beds by over 3,000. I think 3,300 beds are going to be reduced. I will be asking the legislature to restore the Department of Corrections budget so we can get back to rehabilitating the people that are in our charge. And our prisons, our correctional facilities need to be safe, drug-free places. I'll reintroduce a bill that I ran before that would put body scanners in every Department of Corrections facility across the state. We had those provisions to increase body scanners in the budget in the session before last. That was vetoed by the governor as part of his COVID budget reduction plan. I think that we need to do a much better job, not only for our correction personnel so that they're working in a safe environment and they're able to do our jobs, but also for the inmates that are there that deserve the best we can give them to get them back on track. And I give a little, for those investigative reporters out there, think about the date of 1 July when all of these bills took effect. And look at what crime did on 1 July. At least in my community, crimes like property crimes, which we're going to hear about next, increased on 1 July through the rest of the year 100% for things like auto theft and vandalism. I would look into that date. I mean, that tells you the cause and effect of the crime increases we're seeing. So with that, I will pass it to Senator Padden, who's going to speak more about property crimes.
Thank you very much, Senator Wagner. And to your point specifically, just last month, we had a report from the Puget Sound Auto Theft Task Force reporting that 798 cars were stolen in November of 2021 in Pierce County, double the number from November of 2020. And that it can be tied to the anti-police laws stopping pursuit of criminals. We know, for example, that $1 million of equipment was stolen from a car dealership in Lakewood in Pierce County. Police were unable to pursue because of the anti-police laws, and the thieves have not been caught. We've got to repeal some of these laws and allow for pursuit when there's reasonable suspicion, not have to go and wait for probable cause. And I want to indicate that one of the reasons I think property crimes are up so high is the legislature's disastrous response to the State v. Blake decision, which was issued by our state Supreme Court on February 25th of last year, and simply said that you need to put knowingly in the legislation for felony drug possession, that somebody knowingly possesses fentanyl or heroin or methamphetamine. But no, the legislature didn't do that. What they did is said, we don't care in effect. There's no accountability. The first two offenses, there's no punishment. And we are preempting any local laws that were passed that were different, such as was done in Marysville and Grant County. Those got repealed by this legislation, Senate Bill 5476. And then to make matters worse, what they say is, well, we'll refer you to treatment, but no accountability. You don't have to say where you're going to treatment, who's keeping track of the treatment. And then if somehow somebody has kept track and there's been these two prior incidents and you get to a third incident, somebody's kept track, the most that can be done is a misdemeanor, which is only 90 days in jail, a fine of up to $1,000. And a lot of prosecutors, including the King County prosecutor, they don't even prosecute those misdemeanor crimes. Now, in my district, in Newman Lake, out by the Idaho border, we have seen tagging by gangs. This is a rural area and it's unheard of. Fortunately, the citizens out there immediately covered up the tagging, but to see this gang activity be emboldened by the legislature's response. And you know, these folks that need to have methamphetamine, need to have heroin, or need to have fentanyl, how do they get the money to buy that from the gangs? They do that by committing property crimes. So we have seen an escalation in these property crimes, I feel is a direct result of the legislation that was passed last session. So we need to correct that. There is Senate Bill 5523, which would add knowingly back in. That would solve the problem. That's what we need to do. And we will be pushing that in the next session. I'll turn it back to Representative Mossbrucker.
Well, thank you, Senator Patton. And what you said is exactly true. I'm grateful for your comments. I think that the worst part of all of this is I heard from a great man that doing nothing should never be an option. And that's what we're doing. We're literally taking someone who's suffering from addiction and doing nothing twice before we take some action. And that should never be the case. So for example, if someone who's addicted walks up to a doctor, a teacher, a police officer, a legislator, or a reporter and says, I need help today. I want to get off drugs. I don't want to do heroin or cocaine anymore. Can you help me? Often there's no place to send them. So we're very passionate as Republicans about those who are suffering from addiction, but this state v. Blake should have never come down without having the infrastructure in place first, without having the beds for those who need the help so that we can do something about it. This is devastating and it's been very harmful. The House Republicans immediately threw 5 bills at it last year after February when this was introduced. Every member in the Public Safety Committee came out with a bill to try to fix this and all of those unintended consequences that the court ruling left. And we're still working on that today. We have bills in the House and Senate on fentanyl, which we keep seeing in the media that it's one of the #1 killers in the United States. This has to be addressed. And you could argue easily that this is more of a problem because of the State v. Blake decision in Washington State. That was a 5-4 decision last February, and it's left an aftermath of a lot of harmed people that you and I have the privilege of serving. So I am very grateful for you to be here today. I'm going to turn it back to Tracy. We do have a bill, a really great bill I hope you look at. It is House Bill 1656, and that has to do with changing the definition of theft. And Representative Griffey's done an incredible job the last couple of years fighting for this. So please look at that bill and help us support it. Back to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Representative Mossbrucker. Now your questions, you can indicate that you would like to ask a question by using the raise hand function, or by typing a message in the Q&A section. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or let me know in the Q&A section. And we'll give you a moment here to do that. And so let's go first to Joseph O'Sullivan with the Seattle Times.
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I've got a question. I don't know if anybody can help, but I know Democrats are taking some look at some Blake legislation possibly, and also making some changes to reasonable cause standards to make it easier for law enforcement to engage in some areas. And to the extent, and I haven't been able to read your bills yet, so I guess to the extent that anybody could say, I'd be curious to hear the differences you're aware of, at least now, between the Republican approach and the Democratic approach on that.
Well, I haven't seen, Joe, the actual Democrat approach on that, but in general, they're going a little way towards trying to fix these problems. And the fact that they have legislation is an acknowledgement of the problems that exist and that are harming our citizens in our state, with an increase in drug offenses and violent crime. And we have this comprehensive package of bills dealing with public safety, putting victims first, fixing the DOC, property crimes, and State v. Blake. While they may go some of the way, I don't think they have as comprehensive a plan to deal with these problems.
Okay, anything else, Joe?
No, thank you.
Amy Riddell, you have a question.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to ask, when you talked about tracing some of the crime trends in Washington to July 1st, there's a national increase in violent crime. So what do you think is distinctive about Washington and what is more reflective of what's going on nationwide?
Well, I think I can take that. It's a good question, but I think what you're seeing in Washington State mirrors what you're seeing nationally, because the reaction mirrors what we've seen nationally. We saw states across the United States pass bills that are essentially anti-policing bills. So you're seeing a similar reaction in other states as you see in Washington. And I would again turn you to July 1 and look at the data. What happened on July 1st? Criminals were essentially waiting at the starting line to take off in a sprint. At least they were in my community. And I suspect that that is going to be the same across the state if you look at that data. But the cause and effect was all the anti-policing bills across the United States and here in Washington, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Anything else, Amy? Any follow up?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Eric Rosen with the Centralia Chronicle. Go ahead, Eric. Actually, I'm not seeing Eric on here. So, Eric, we will come back to you. Any other questions? Again, you can raise your hand or let me know in the Q&A section or chat if that works for you. Okay. Seeing none, again, you all should have received an email with details of the package. If you didn't get it by the end of this event and would like to have it, just let me know you could let me know in the Q&A area. I'll keep this open for a little bit, or just email me, tracy.ellis@leg.wa.gov. And any wrap up, Senator Patton?
Well, I just wanted to especially thank our guest, Jill Brown, and point out her testimony indicates that these affect real people, these laws. They're not just theoretical. And we've seen that time and time again. It's unprecedented, the number of law enforcement, sheriffs, police chiefs that had press conferences, that have made statements dealing with the impact of these laws throughout our state, from Federal Way up to Cedar Woolley to the Spokane Valley to all the districts that we represent. It seems to hit the entire state. So these package of bills, they're all not going to get through, but hopefully some will. And I think they're absolutely vital to improving and enhancing public safety in our state.
Representative Mossbrucker.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And I appreciate everyone being here today and to listening to the package that we've put forward. The rights and needs of victims and survivors are being put on the back burner. We're not doing enough in the state to protect victims of rape, sexual assault, human trafficking. We've got to increase crimes on DUI and on violent crime. And this is at a time when fear is at an all-time high in our communities, in our homes. So when we started removing those important tools from law enforcement and allowing criminals to mock the system, this is the outcome. This is the world we live in now. This is the state we live in now. And this is the fear that we have that doesn't need to be there. And again, I'm very grateful for the work that police officers do. We have a shortage. Our communities are less safe, partly because of that. And we have to remember at the end of the day that when something really bad happens in the darkest moments of the state of Washington and across the nation, law enforcement shows up. You and I run and hide. So please remember that. And again, thank you for being here today.
Again, we do all thank you for attending. Anything else? Anyone else like to make any comments? All right, seeing none and with no further questions, again, We appreciate you being with us. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us, call us, text us, however you'd like to get a hold of us, and we'll try to answer those for you. Thank you and have a very nice day.